My name is Temitope Kolodoye, and I'll introduce myself a little bit further in a few minutes. Thank you for joining us today for Beyond Paper, the Time for More Efficient Clinical Trials with InForm Global Trial Management 6 EDC. This is part one of our InForm GTM 6 EDC webinar series. We're really excited to launch this webinar series with you. And Eclipse is really going to try to focus on three core areas as it relates to leveraging InForm: systems integration, the high quality data, and of course the minimizing of risks and costs.
Hello everyone. As Tope passes that off to me, I'll be giving you a demonstration on the InForm 6.0 GTM environment. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate over to our InForm demo system. So I'm going to start out by logging in as a CRC user, a site coordinator user. And here we are brought into the home page of the InForm system. Right here you can see we have a configurable home page. Right now we're configured to show the Eclipse IRT system. So we can put either a software in here, we can put a web page in here, we can put the InForm portal, which is a portal system inside of InForm that allows us to put documents, etc. So this is a very configurable home page, and we can put multiple items in here. Across the top, we always have the particular trial we're in. This is the PFST state trial and the location within the trial that you're currently at. So I'm going to go ahead and enroll a subject into the system. To do that, we click here on Enroll, and we're brought to the screening log, and we can see that we currently have some subjects who have been screened, and we have a subject who has been screen failed due to not being in the proper age. So I'm going to go ahead, add a new candidate. Here we have to collect the initials. If we're doing a European study, we can collect just dashes. I'm going to enter my birth date and my screening date. And then I go ahead and click Submit down the lower right-hand corner. We can see our subjects now in our screening log, and they're ready to be enrolled. So once again, we could have put some automated checks here to verify that their age is correct, or we could put some additional custom items on there. We now have the option of entering our subject number. In this case, our study is configured for a manually entered subject number, but we can actually set this up to be an automatically generated number as well. And we can configure different parameters and sequences to make that match what you need in your system. And then we go ahead and click Enroll down the bottom. Here we have our visit calculator, and this is going to come up and help us figure out when our next visits should be for our particular subject. And if we have an offset or anything, we can actually come in here and select that offset, and it'll recalculate our visit schedule for us. And I'm going to go ahead and click Go to our first visit. And then we're brought into our first visit. So I'm actually going to go up, take a look at our Subjects tab next. As we click Subjects, we are able to see all the subjects for our site. We're at Site 01. If I was a sponsor user, I might have multiple sites here available for me, so I might have a pull down. But where I am a site user, I'm actually only going to have one site available. Here I can see a list of all my enrolled subjects and all the visits they're expected to complete. We can see it's very graphical. We have a nice rectangle here with a triangle, and if we hover over this, we're able to see some hover help that shows us that the data is incomplete and it has queries. The queries is represented by the question mark here. Here we have a gray triangle, gray rectangle, which is going to be not started, and a green rectangle, which is data complete. So we have a very graphical interface. We can see all of the visits that are expected, where we have queries. We can additionally drill into a particular subject by clicking on the subject number. We get a little bit different representation. We get all the visits for that particular subject. We can expand any one of those visits, see all the form states, how many of them have been completed, how many have been frozen, and how many have been locked. Additionally, we can navigate directly to any of those forms by selecting the form itself. Additionally, across the top here, we can see that we have some filtering, so we can hide different forms. So we can go ahead and highlight all the incompleted forms. So we can come in and go to those particular forms. And we have the same ability along the top, as well as some different statuses that we can filter by. So I'm going to go ahead and do some data entry. And to do that, I'm going to go ahead and go to our freshly enrolled subject, which I actually enrolled with the same subject number. But as we come over here, we'll see we have our first visit, the baseline visit. And the only form we have available to us right now is the DOV form. So the system has the ability to do what's called an enforced data visit. You'll notice once I go ahead and complete this data visit and submit, we'll have a whole bunch more forms appear over here. So now we have all of our forms available to us. And that is an optional configuration. You also see that our same colors that we saw back in the subject screen are over here, green for complete, yellow for incomplete, and gray for not started. You'll notice that 2 of our forms have been completed, although we only entered data for the data visit. The subject identification form was automatically mapped over from our enrollment screens, and this is also where we would go ahead and modify our subject number or our initials if we had a typo. Our demographics form has also been started, and that's because our date of birth and screening date were also automatically mapped over from our enrollment process. So here we can see we have some yellow items. So anytime you see a yellow item, that's indicating that the data is required but it's not been submitted. Since we already have some data on this form, it's already been started. So these items are considered missing data at this point. And they're required, and it's denoted by an asterisk right next to the number. So if there's no asterisk here, these would actually be white still, even if they didn't have data in them. So I'm going to go ahead and enter some data. We have radio buttons. Whenever we have a radio button, we have the ability to make one choice. If we choose something else, it'll automatically clear for us. We have the ability to have soft checks and hard checks in place. So I'm going to go ahead and enter a height here of 172.2. I'm going to go ahead and select our marital status. And does the subject have any children? So down here we have a combination control which actually has radio buttons and check boxes along with a nested other box here. So I just want to point out that all of these have a relationship to each other. So say I came down here and I select that box, you can see that the path's already selected all the way up to the top for me. Additionally, if I change this top level radio button, that clears out the whole path for me. And then we have some check boxes which actually allow us to make multiple selections. So here for gender, I selected female. You'll notice when I go ahead and submit this data by clicking submit over here, another form is going to pop up down here, and it's going to be our pregnancy form. So InForm does have the ability to do dynamic forms based on the data entered into the system. You're also going to notice that our height item stayed yellow, and that's because I did not select a unit. So the system's smart enough to know that this data is not fully completed. So if I go ahead and click on this to select it, it's going to bring us over to our reason for change screen. So I can go ahead and select centimeters, but now I also have to provide a reason for change. So the system's fully audited. I can go ahead and select out of my pull down, or I can type in my own reason for change. So now when we come back to into this particular item, we'll see that we have a little yellow icon here. If I click on that, we're going to be able to see our audit history. Our initial transaction was done at 13:19, and then I added the centimeters with a transcription error a minute later based on the fact it was still yellow. So now I'm going to go ahead and go over to our vitals form. And here we can see we have a couple of different things going on. We have some different items here, and we can see they change color when I actually go over the top of them. Basically, we have a health system linked to these particular items. So if I want some additional information about recording the weight, I can click right on the item. Some help pops up for us. We can see that the weight must be measured. The patient must be indoor clothing with shoes off. We can do either kilograms or pounds, and they'll automatically be converted to our desired units. I can go ahead and close this. Here we have a little note on the item that's recorded to 1 decimal place. So I'm going to go ahead and try to just enter 100 pounds. And we have a hard stop here that says we have to actually have a decimal place. So I can go in and do 101 and put my pound, select pounds. It will now let me go on to my next item. So InForm will have the ability to enforce certain rules. For example, I can enforce that a field has to be text, it has to be an integer, it has to be a float. If it's a float, it has to have a certain number of decimal places. If it's text, it has to have a maximum of a certain number of characters. And those are all hard checks. So I'm going to go ahead and enter my temperature. Blood pressure, pulse rates, and beats per minute. And you can see there's actually no entry control here for my BMI. I'm going to go ahead and submit this. And we're going to see we get a lot of automated queries. So here we've seen that the range is outside of expected value. Of course, I selected Celsius by mistake instead of Fahrenheit. We could also see my systolic and diastolic are both out of range as I put them in backwards. And my respiratory rate is just a little bit high, out of range as well. And we can also see our BMI was calculated. And that's actually calculated using the height from our demographics form as well as the weight from this form. So InForm also has the ability to do cross-form edit checks and cross-form data mapping, as well as using data from different forms to do calculations. So now I have all of these queries on here. So I can go ahead and I can address this by changing my data. So say, oh, well, that was actually a transcription error or maybe some new information. Now I'll satisfy my query. It'll go over automatically to an answered state. Or I can select my query and I can provide a typed in answer. And they'll also move my query over to an answered state. Now, obviously, those probably weren't really good reasons for changing my data, but at that point, the query is only moved over to an answer state, and our monitor or data manager will have the option of reviewing that later before the query actually is moved over to a closed state. So they can always reissue that for additional information if they need to. Also, down here at the bottom of the page, notice that we have a spot for some signatures, and we're going to talk more about that later on. So now I want to go over to our next form, which is our dose vitals. And I want to point out something that's a little bit new to InForm, starting in the 6.0 series. And that is the repeating data set. So here we have a repeating data set. It's very much, if you've used InForm in the past, it's very much like an add entry, except you're able to pre-populate certain values. If you have not, it's basically we're able to create a table with certain values pre-populated. For example, here we have pre-dose, 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, 4 hours. This is recorded in the database along with the data, as well as some items to go ahead and enter after that. So we can go ahead and enter our date. And I'm going to go ahead and submit data. Sorry, as you can see there, the system's smart enough to know that we came up with a key item. We're able to know that it was the same exact date and time, so it actually gave us complaint because you can't have the same exact date because there's a key on this field, as well as we actually have some queries set up on this as well. So I'm going to go ahead and enter some additional information. And there's that message basically saying that we can't have it because it's a key value. So I'm going to go ahead and go in and change that. And then I'm going to go submit it. And that's reds representing the fact that those have the key values. So here we can see now we only have one red field, and we have a query on that. And if we view that, the system is actually smart enough to know, because we have a pre-check in there, that it's supposed to be 60 minutes, but it was not. But it wasn't between 55 and 65 minutes for the automated check. So we could actually put queries in there to check our different time date ranges. So along the top here, we have our visit schedule. So here we see we've been in our baseline visit. We have all of our forms available. Along the top, we have all the different visits available to us. Often we'll see a adverse event and a concomitant medications visit. And we'll have this in its own particular visit, and it will not be related to any of the other visits. So here we have a adverse event, con meds, and a treatment form, which really apply to all of our visits, so they're in their own separate visit. I'm going to go ahead and go into our treatment form. The forms we've been looking at so far are what we consider a flat form. The treatment form is a repeating form. So here you can see when we navigate to it, we see no treatment forms have been filled out. We don't see actually any items. That's because we have to come over here and click New, and now we'll get a new form. And I can submit the data, and I can select New again, and I'll get a second new form. Submit my data. And then also I'd like to point out that this is a fairly complex form, as it's a repeating form and also has an add entry down below. So I'm going to go ahead and click on add entry, fill out some information. And what an add entry does is it's very similar to the repeating data set we saw earlier, except it has no pre-populated data. We can populate this as many times as we need to. And it'll keep going. So it's a repeating set of items. So if we're trying to collect anything on a certain form multiple times, we would be using that. So now if I come back up here and select Summary, we'll see that we have multiple records for our treatment. So now if we were to navigate away from this form and come back, it'll show us our summary with all of our records in place. And we could add as many new records here as we want, or we could actually create a key and limit the number of records that we put into here. So here we have the adverse event form, and once again, this is a repeating form like the treatment form. I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. And what I really want to show here is when I click Submit, this form is actually associated with the ConMeds form. As you can see down here, we get a copy of our ConMeds form, which is also a repeating form, and it will allow me to add any new ConMeds that are actually associated with this AE. So I can click New, enter my ConMed, and then I can actually enter additional ConMeds as well. And here you can see that we're actually, these ConMeds are actually associated with this adverse event. And I can actually unassociate them if I want to by unchecking the box. Providing a reason for change and clicking submit. Actually didn't clear the box when I went in there. So here you can see now we have one adverse event which has two ConMeds, and only one of them is associated with that particular adverse event. If we navigate over to our ConMeds page, we'll see those two ConMeds. Additionally, we'll still see our associations with the forms. If we were to go into here, we'll actually see our ConMed on top, along with all of our adverse events down below. So this is what's considered the associated form functionality within InForm. Now, if I go over to my week 8 visit, I would like to show here as we come in. Once again, we have our enforced data visit in place. I'm going to go ahead and navigate down to our eligibility form. And here we have a simple question as whether or not the subject would like to participate in the extension study. So I'm going to go ahead and click yes. And what you're going to notice when I submit is that we're going to have 2 more visits appear here. And this is the dynamic visit functionality inside of InForm. So we can actually make any visit dynamic. So we can configure extension studies, or if we don't want any extra visits to appear until the subject's ready to go on to the next visit, we can make all of our visits dynamic. There's a lot of different things we can do. But we can go ahead and create dynamic visits and put whatever forms we want into there. We also have unscheduled visits. So here we have a visit that, you know, if the subject just happens to come into the doctor's office not feeling well and we need some place to collect data, we can capture the particular date of visit that they arrived, the particular stuff that we want to collect, and we click submit, and we'll get those particular forms will appear. And say they come in the next day, we can click new. If we need a different form, we can select that form. And we can do as many of those as we want. We navigate through them by selecting the particular data visit we want to look at down below. So here, this is a combination of the unscheduled repeating visit functionality with InForm, as well as dynamic forms, which allow us to choose which forms we want to appear. So we can actually combine a lot of these functionalities together to make a very, very flexible system. And now as we look at our Queries tab, we're going to see all of our queries that we have in place. This is a typical form that the site coordinator is going to look at. It allows them to answer all of their open queries, and we can schedule any, we can do very different filtering along the top, open, answered, closed, etc. So here we have 2 answered queries. Here's all of our queries. Some of them are closed, but they're basically, as a coordinator, they're going to be focused on their open queries. They can actually click on a particular query. It's going to bring up the item in question. If they need additional information, they can click this arrow, and it'll bring them right to the page itself. And we can go back out to the subject, the whole subject, if we need to. We have documents, which is going to provide us some information like our study design guide, so we can look at how our different forms are, basically our setup. So our protocol, our actual CCGs. We have our protocol guide, which we can actually put the protocol in place. Once again, our visit calculator, if we need to revisit that for any reason after the subject's been enrolled. And we also have a sample book set up, so we can come through and see what all the different forms look like and how the data entry works without playing with an actual subject. We have an admin information, which is basically some information about the system that the help desk may use. We can navigate directly to any subject, so a CRC can come in and go directly to the subject they want to, enter the number and hit the button and it goes right to it, as well as our most recently visited CRFs. So basically we have a shortcut to bring us right back to where we were before, which is really, really handy. We also have our InForm help, our user guide and reporting user guide, our logout button, and we can come over here and change our username and password. InForm also has a built-in password recovery system, which will allow us to enter in our email address and some questions and our own answers, and that helps us recover our password should we misplace it. We can just click on password recovery when we're logging in, and the system will email us our password and our ability to reset our passwords. And log in as a CRA or a monitor user. And of course, one of the most important jobs of the monitors is to go through and review data, source verify, and freeze and work with queries. So you'll notice up top we have an additional item up here, which is monitor. So if I select that, you'll see that we have a listing of all of our forms, and we can check them off and freeze and unfreeze the forms. Additionally, I can go to a particular form, and although this form, you'll see this form's already been monitored as it has checkboxes next to it. If I go choose a different form, you can see we have some checkboxes, and I can monitor my items. Or if I click my top checkbox, I can freeze everything and submit, and my form is going to go to a state of monitored. So now if we come back to here, we can see that our SI form has now been verified. So typically, of course, I would freeze my forms prior to verifying them. Additionally, I can go through here and click Set SV Settings, and I can set up partial source verification. So I can pick the number of initial subjects I want 100% verified, and then I can go through and select critical data that is required for verification for all subjects. So I do have the ability to set up my partial verification within InForm itself. InForm, the most recent versions of InForm also come with the data viewer. So I'm going to go ahead and click Review, and it's going to bring us into the data viewer. And this is a very powerful tool for monitoring. It gives us the ability not only to see at a quick glance which particular forms have queries that are open, closed, answered, various form states, complete, locked, not unlocked. We also can perform high-level things. So, for example, if we wanted to come in and freeze all of the forms on the baseline visit, and once again, now this is for all of our sites, I can select my 32, and I can just click this freeze button. It's going to freeze all 32 completed forms. Or if I wanted to filter that down, I can put just Site 1. We can see now we've dropped down to 29 forms just for Site 1. I can select that 29 completed forms and freeze it. That in itself is a great functionality. It really speeds up the ability to freeze and lock forms without navigating to each form. But we actually can go one step further. We can actually go in here and select a date as a filter. So say maybe the last time I did my monitoring for my particular site was February 2nd. I can go ahead and change everything and set it up so I freeze everything that's changed after February 2nd. And in this case, this happens to be all of my forms. But if there was only 5 forms that have changed since February 2nd, I would only see a number 5 there. I could go in and freeze them and then go out to my site and just look at those particular forms. Additionally, if I'm on my site, they're all frozen. I reviewed them all manually, and now I want to just go ahead and source verify all of them because I've already gone through, manually verified them. They all looked good. I can just select that same number 29. I can come up here, and I can mark them as verified all at once without having to go through, go to each form, and check each checkbox. So once again, this tool provides a great way of doing mass viewing of data and acting on large amounts of data at once. So say I wanted to actually look at my data for these completed forms. I can actually go to record listings. It's going to bring me into the particular record form. Right here we can see we're in our baseline ECG form. And if I need to expand that out to see that a little bit better, I can do that. But it's going to show me all the data from my baseline ECG. We can see right away that this has queries on it. We can come over here and see what those particular queries are on. We can see all of our data. Say I wanted to see a different form, my adverse events. Well, it's not there because that was not one of my completed forms, but I can come down here and do show all. I can go over to my adverse event forms. Here's all my adverse event forms. I can look at all the data for that adverse event. I can see here, for example, that I have some vague things like pain. I can actually go in, add a query to that by clicking query. I can put my new query in. It'll go out and create my query. Now say I had a 25 headaches and I wanted to get some additional information about those. I could actually highlight all 25 of my headaches, or I could put a filter in by just clicking on this button and say contains headache. And just limit all my data just to my headaches. So if there's too many records there for me to see, as we can see, we could have hundreds of these. I could come in, select that data, and add queries to them. Both at the same time. So now you'll see it'll actually go out and do queries on both items. Then I can once again just go ahead and show all. So once again, now instead of creating queries on a form-by-form basis, if I have certain trends, I can go ahead and address them all at once. And say I wanted to look at some con meds in relation to my headaches. So I can go ahead and select this and open comparison view with my con meds. Here I can see all my con meds, and I can see all of my AEs. If I wanted to look at con meds just related to here, I can go ahead and do that. There we go, sorry. I had to actually select the subject, select the whole row, and we have our con meds just related to these particular AEs. So I can see all my con meds. I can review both my con meds and my adverse events all at the same time for my particular subject. Go ahead, close my view. And say I selected this item, I see there's a query on it, I would need to know some additional information about it. I can come down here and expand my detail for that item. I can see some information about my item, including my audit trail, right, all in one view. And then I'm also going to go over to our CDM user. So I'm going to go ahead and log out and go in as a monitor user. Data manager user. Once again, go back into my review tab. Now say I wanted to do an interim analysis. And lock all of my forms. I could actually, as a as a CDM user, I could come down, select all of my data, and I could come up here and click lock, and that's going to lock all the forms in my study at once. So right there, everything will be locked. Instead of having to go through individually lock things, I'm able to lock everything at once, and then when I'm done, I can go ahead and unlock everything. So interim analysis comes through. You're not running through to each form, locking each form. You can perform all that all at once. Now, say I might be interested in looking at some data. I can go back to my data records. Someone asked me about adverse events. I can come into my adverse event. I can come into my AE form, take a look at all my data, see what I have for adverse events. Say I had a lot more records than I have here. Once again, I can do my filtering. Anything that contains yes. And now limit my records for my adverse events. So I can see anything that's a serious AE at that point. InForm itself also includes a robust reporting system. So here we can see we have a little group of standard reports. We have reports related to subjects. So we have some completion reports, dropout reports, etc. We have reports related to queries, so we can go in and see site performance based on query, user performance based on query, give us an idea of which queries are popping up most, item usage, and of course CRF, so we can see cycle times for CRFs, etc. So I'm going to actually take a look at the CRF aging by site. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that report. I'm going to pick all of my US sites. I'm going to pick anything that's been started or scheduled to start. I'm going to do an aging interval of 7 and go ahead and run my report.
Jeff, we had a question, actually two, wanted to get your input on.
Sure.
So the first is, how long does it take to get trained and what does the training process involve? And then the second is related to the timelines for the database builds.
So for the first question for training, typically we can set up a training course, so we can roll them out. We can roll training out to sites on a ongoing basis. So we can either set up a scheduled training. So as you bring sites on, we will do online trainings on a regular basis. If you're new to the system, we like, if possible, to do a live training with the sponsor users. But once again, we can do an online training. And if you had experience with basically any EDC system, it doesn't take very long to come up to speed. So for a typical first new to InForm for a sponsor user, we might do a few-hour course, whereas sites who have typically used EDC in the past, we might go and do maybe an hour or two overview and typically tailor that right towards your particular studies and also the separate roles of the CRC and the investigator. So once again, not very long. Training is very simple in the system. It's pretty intuitive, as most people are used to using the web now. And we also have a very robust help desk which can answer any questions that arise as we go through the studies. As for actual development time, depending on the complexity of the study, we typically run between 4 to 6 weeks for setting up a study. Of course, for a new customer, we would like to allow longer, just because we want to work with you, get you used to the product, the different specifications, help you understand how the different functionalities would work, and really give you a good thorough time to review the system, just to make sure that you have a good idea of what you want and we best get the stuff in place that you need and the functionality that you need. But typically 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. And one that I'm sorry I missed, back at the signature section. Can the PI signatures be performed on casebook basis instead of on individual forms?
Yes, so InForm itself supports 2 levels. We can either do the casebook or the form level signature. Actually, we do have let me go ahead and go back in as a PI user really quick. So here we actually do have both set up. So we have a CRF signature for the pregnancy form, and here you'll see we have a case book signature on the final form for the whole thing. So when we click preview here, we'll see the whole book, and we click preview here, we'll only see that particular form.
Thanks, Jeff.
You're welcome. So now I'm going to go ahead and go back over to our CDM user. I have one final item I would like to demonstrate and related to reporting, and that is our ad hoc reporting capabilities. So if we come in and we select ad hoc, I'm going to go into trial management model. We can actually do reports on both metadata or trial management data as well as clinical data. I'm just going to quickly put together a report that's going to give us the site name. I'm going to go down to forms and select some form counts. So actually, let's do some subjects. Let's do some subject counts. I'm going to go ahead and subjects, select some subject counts. Say I want to know the subject count for the site, the number of screened, the number of failed, the number of enrolled, and the number of dropped out. So we come up here, we'll see just by double-clicking on them, they're going to appear in those reports. I can go ahead and run this report, and I can see that for my particular sites, my subject counts are 6 and 1. 6 of them were screened. We saw that screen fail when we first went into the enrollment screen, and we can see that 1 subject's dropped out, and that was a casebook that we had signed off on. I can go ahead and come in here and change the title. So it's now subject status. And I can go ahead and I can save this form out for future use. I can print it. I can export it into Excel, etc. And the same is true for any of the custom reports. So I know we're coming up on the end of the hour, and that's really everything I wanted to show you today. But I wanted to open up to any questions. If you guys have any additional questions, and bring Tope back on the line as well.
Sure. Thank you, Jeff. Yes, we had one other question with regard to accessibility. Is the application able to be utilized via a tablet like an iPad?
Yes. We have gone through and validated that it will run on an iPad. I think the most recent version is fully validated by Oracle on an iPad, but we do know as early as version 5.5 we've gone through and run tests. What will not run on an iPad is reporting. So the data entry portion will run on an iPad perfectly fine.
Thanks, Jeff. So thanks so much, and we look forward to you joining us for future Eclipse webinars. Take care and have a great day and rest of the week.